Okay, so a quadratic equation in the form of ax squared is equal to c. So, effectively, a quadratic equation is one in which the highest power of the polynomial is 2. So, x squared, for example, or a squared, or c squared. Whatever the polynomial is, the biggest power is 2. Okay? So, quadratic, or in other words, what number multiplied by itself is equal to a new number? X squared is equal to 4. What number squared is equal to 4? Okay, so there's a few more examples than just those two. X squared is equal to 9. 2x squared is equal to 64. X squared is equal to 0. And 3x squared minus 4 is equal to 71 are all examples of quadratic equations, okay? Because all of the powers in these equations at the most is equal to 2, okay? We typically like using x for these, just like we normally do. So to solve these equations, you would do everything like you normally would to solve an equation, but then you do the opposite of squaring a number as our last step. So the opposite of squaring is the square root, okay? So we have talked about these a little bit before, but the opposite of squaring a number is taking the square root of that number, okay? So the opposite of 4 squared, so 16, is the square root of 16, which is 4. Okay? So when we have a quadratic that equals a positive number, then there are two possible solutions, okay? So what do I mean by that? Well, think about if I'm asking you, okay, what number do I square to get an answer of 9? So what times itself is equal to 9? Now, the very obvious number is 3. So 3 is equal to... So 3 squared is equal to 9. But there's actually another answer that is also equal to 9. And in this case, it is when x is equal to negative 3. Okay? So negative 3 also works. Why does that work? Well, remember, when we square a number which is multiplying a number by itself, minus 3 times minus 3, well, we know that two negatives make a positive, so my answer must be positive 9. Okay, so minus 3 times minus 3 is also equal to 9. So if x squared is equal to 9, then x must be equal to 3 and negative 3, or another way of writing that is x is equal to plus or minus 3. Okay, so plus or minus just literally means that the positive and the negative answers are both, true, or they're there. Is I guess what we would say. Okay. When we have a quadratic that is equal to 0, so for example, x squared is equal to 0. Okay. How many solutions are there to that? Well, it's quite easy. There's only one. Okay. And what is that possible solution? What number times by itself is equal to 0? 0. X squared is equal to 0, so x must be equal to 0. Now, when we have a quadratic that equals a negative number, then there are no possible solutions. Okay. So for example, if I say I had x squared is equal to negative 4, then x has no solution as no number multiplied by itself will give a negative answer. And you can think about it too. So a number multiplied by itself. So if I take a positive number and times it by itself, it's equal to a positive answer. If I take a negative number and multiply it by itself, which is another negative number, I also get a positive. Now the only way to get a negative answer when you multiply is to do a positive and a negative. But a positive and a negative numbers aren't the same. They're actually different. So I can't actually get an answer that is negative. So 4 and negative 4 are two different numbers. Okay, 4 degrees is different to negative 4 degrees. Okay, but there is no solution to a quadratic when it's a negative answer. Okay, so we're going to be starting at question 3. And we're going to be working out, well, how many solutions do the following quadratics have? X squared is equal to 121. Well, this number is positive, so this number has 2 solutions. Okay, that's it. So how many solutions? That one has 2. Okay, minus 4, x squared is equal to 64. Well, the first thing that we would do is divide both sides by negative 4. Divide by negative 4. And then x squared is equal to, well, 64 divided by negative 4 is equal to negative 16. X squared is equal to negative 16. Well, I can't have the square root of a negative, so there are no solutions. X squared plus 7 is equal to 0. Well, let's start off by subtracting 7 from both sides, and that leaves me with x squared is equal to 0. Well, if x squared is equal to 0, then there must be only one solution. and that is when x is equal to 0. Last but not least, we've got 3x squared minus 2 is equal to 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 2 to both sides, so plus 2 plus 2. That leaves me with 3x squared is equal to 7. Divide both sides by 3. Doesn't like me putting a division there. Divide by 3, divide by 3. So x squared is equal to, or whatever 7 divided by 3 is, so that's what, like 2.3 repeater, I think. Okay, so because x squared is equal to a positive number, okay, then there will be 2 solutions for that one as well. Okay, so that one's pretty easy, I think. Okay, find the possible solutions for x in the following equation. So what are the answers? So we've got x squared is equal to 1. Okay, so well, what we're going to do is we're going to do the opposite of squaring, which is the square root. So square root, square root. So x is equal to the square root of 1. We'll put that in a calculator. You get plus or minus 1. Because remember, so in other words, what we're saying is, what multiplied by itself gives 1. So 1 times 1 is 1, or negative 1 times negative 1 is 1. So x is equal to plus or minus 1. Okay, and I'm going to write all my answers like this because it's just easier. Okay, 2x squared is equal to 242. We'll divide both sides by 2, divide by 2. We get x squared is equal to 121. Take the square root of both sides, and that leaves me with x is equal to plus or minus, let me write it properly, plus or minus 11, because 11 times 11 is 121. 11 times negative 11 is also 121. So x is equal to plus or minus 11. Now x squared over 5 is equal to 5. Well, we're going to start off by timesing both sides by 5. Times by 5. We get x squared is equal to 25. Okay. The square root of 25, well, x is equal to plus or minus 5. Okay, that's my answer for that one. And 6, the last one here. Now, this one's a bit trickier. Okay, much trickier. So what we're going to do for this one is I'm going to swap the 9 and the 4x squared around. And we are allowed to do this. So 1 over 9 is equal to 4x squared, like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by 4. Divide by 4. Now if you want the theory for this, I'm just going to do this on the right. 1 over 9 divided by 4 is the same as doing 1 over 9 divided by 4 over 1, which is the same as doing 1 over 9 times 1 over 4. So remember, dividing fractions is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. Okay, so 1 over 9 times 1 over 4 is 1 over 36. So over here, when I divide both sides by 4, I'm going to get x squared is equal to 1 over 36. Okay, now the square root of 1 over 36, well, we put that into our calculator and get something nice. Oh, not very nice. And in fact, we're going to get, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know. So x is equal to plus or minus. Now here's a really cool trick. We've got 1 on the top, so the square root of 1 is just 1. And on the bottom, we've got 36, so the square root of 36 is 6. So we've got plus or minus 1 on 6. Okay, so that's just using the fact that the square root of 1 is equal to 1 and the square root of 36 is equal to 6, okay? So you won't be required to do those ones too much, okay? Those are a little bit of an extension-y type ones, but it's good to know. So this is what question 5 looks like. Solve the quadratics, leaving your answer in exact surd form. So exact surd form just basically means we're going to leave them as square roots, okay? We don't actually simplify the answer. So whatever we get in that surd, like inside the square root, is what we leave, okay? So surd is just square root that can't be simplified. Now what I mean by simplified is that if I was to put it in a calculator, I don't get a whole answer back, basically. Okay, so I'll show you what I mean. X squared is equal to 32. So if x squared is equal to 32, I'll take the square root of both sides, and x is equal to the square root of 32. Or plus or minus. So it's always plus and minus, okay? So remember, plus or minus. Because if I square 32, then I just get 32, because the square root of 32 times the square root of 32 is just equal to 32. Now, if you were to put square root of 32 into your calculator, you would notice that you get an answer that doesn't look very nice. So that's why we just leave it in the surd form like that, okay? It's just a simpler way to write it. X squared is equal to 5, so x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 5. It's just that simple, in fact. 2x squared is equal to 16. Okay, well, we're going to start off by dividing both sides by 2. And that leaves us with x squared is equal to 8. So if x squared is equal to 8, I take the square root of both sides, and that gives me x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 8. Okay, and again, because if I put the square root of 8 in the calculator, I get, 2 point, I think it's like 2.8 something. Because that's like a really long number, we don't want that. We just want to leave it like this square root. Okay, x squared over 5 is equal to 11. Well, I'm going to start off by multiplying both sides by 5. So that gives me x squared is equal to 55. Okay, so if x squared is equal to 55, that means x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 55. Now remember to always go down your page. The only reason I'm going across is because, I made these PowerPoints really tiny. Question 6. Find possible solutions to the following equations, leaving your answer in exact form if required. Now, this if required means if you can't simplify it to something nice, then don't simplify it at all. Kind of like if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all, kind of thing. Okay, x squared minus 64 is equal to 0. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off by adding 64 to both sides, just like we would solve a regular equation. So that leaves us with x squared is equal to 64, positive 64. Now I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 64. And we put the square root of 64 in our calculator, and it works out that we're going to get x is equal to plus or minus 8. Because the square root of 64, 8 times 8. Or minus 8 times minus 8. And the last one, x squared plus 9 is equal to 0. Oh, sorry, the next one I should say, not the last one. So x squared plus 9 is equal to 0. I'm going to start off by subtracting 9 from both sides. So I get x squared is equal to minus 9. Then I say to myself, hang on a second. If I was to take the square root of minus 9, it doesn't actually work. So therefore, x has no solution. Okay? So x has no solution. So that's what we just write when we have a negative answer like that. Question 6 continued. Let's have a look at part C. So 2x squared minus 30 is equal to 0. So I'm going to start off by adding 30 to both sides, just like with a regular equation. That leaves me with 2x squared is equal to 30. Then I divide both sides by 2. So divide by 2, divide by 2. So x squared is equal to plus or minus, sorry, not just yet. X squared is equal to 15. Then I take the square root of both sides. That gives me x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 15. Okay, so remember to remove that x squared, we're going to just take a square root. Now, I'm going to just write that over here so I know I don't run out of space. So x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 15. Now, we know that if we put the square root of 15 into our calculator, we won't get a nice answer. So we're just going to leave that. This is that if required comes in. So that is as far as we need to go. Now, this last one is a little bit different because you'll notice that there's actually an inequality at the end. So when we solve this one, what we're going to do is we're just going to ignore this bit for now. And we're just going to solve it regularly, okay? So you can do that, and we're going to do that. So we're going to start off by subtracting 15 and subtracting 15. So we get 4x squared is equal to, well, 79 minus 15 is in fact 64. Then we're going to divide both sides by 4. So divide by 4, divide by 4, and that leaves me with x squared is equal to 16. Now, to find x by itself, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Okay, so x is equal to the square root of 16, plus or minus the square root of 16. So x is equal to plus or minus 4. Now remember, plus or minus 4 means that x can be equal to 4, or x can be equal to negative 4. And this is where this last bit comes in now. The x must be greater than 0. So what this part means is just which of these two answers is greater than or equal to 0. So which one is it? Well, obviously it's the one that's 4 because it's bigger than 0. So when I actually go to do my answer, I'm not going to do x is equal to plus or minus 4 or plus or minus the root of 16. I'm only concerned about the one that's bigger than 0. In this case, it is the positive one. If this was in fact a less than sign, then the one I would care about is the negative, not the positive, because the negative is the one that's below 0. But because we're focused on the one that's greater than 0, I like the... So we're only going to focus on the positive ones for that one. So only one answer for this one, as the other is below 0. Okay, so that's just what that part means. Now we've only got 4 more we're going to do for this one, so let's have a look. Solve the following by first writing in the form of ax squared is equal to c. Answer in exact form. So regardless of what the form is, we're going to leave it as a surd. So 4x squared is equal to 3x squared plus 100. So what on earth do we do for this? Well, we're going to start off by collecting the like terms. So 4x squared and 3x squared are like terms. I want to put them together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 3x squared from both sides, okay? Now the reason I picked 3x squared is I say to myself, well, which one's bigger? Is 4x bigger, 4x squared bigger, or is 3x squared bigger? Well, considering I've got 4 in this one and 3 in this one, it means that the 4 is bigger, so I'm going to move everything to the left side. So minus 3x squared minus 3x squared. That leaves me with x squared is equal to, well, what's left over is the 100. X squared is equal to 100. So then I'm going to take the square root of both sides to get x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 100. Now it does say to leave an exact form, but because we can simplify this one, we're going to write it as x is equal to plus or minus 10, because the square root of 100 is 10. 10 times 10 is 100. Okay. So this is a similar one now, but with a little bit of a twist. I've got a minus 3x, so I've got x squared minus 3x, and I've got 81 minus 3x on this side. What I need to do is I need to move all the x's to one side and everything else to the other side. So I'm going to move this guy to the other side, and to do that, I'm going to add 3x to both sides. So plus 3x plus 3x. Now what you notice is the minus 3x on this side cancels out with this one because we're getting rid of it. So that one's going to go with that one. Okay, but you'll also notice that on this side we've got minus 3x and we've got plus 3x as well. So that one's going to disappear too. So by adding 3x to both sides, that leaves me with x squared is equal to 81. Now, to get the x by itself, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 81. And again, it says to leave an exact form, but we can simplify this one to a nice number. The square root of 81 is just equal to 9. So x is equal to plus or minus 9. X squared plus 5x plus 6 is equal to 5x plus 6. Okay, so again, we're going to do the same thing, but I'm going to move this number to the right. Oh, I didn't actually put this one on a timer. Well, I think and I'm going to move this one to the left, okay? Or alternatively, because I've got 5x and 5x, so 2 positive 5x's, these two are going to cancel out, okay? Because when I do minus 5x on both sides, they're actually going to cancel out and they're going to disappear. And the same with the 6's as well, because if I subtract 6 and I subtract 6, well, they just turn into 0. Okay, so that's going to cancel out with that. So what do I have left? Well, I've got x squared, and I've got that equal to, well, what do I have left? I removed the 5x, and I removed the 6. Well, I've got nothing left over, so that's just equal to 0. So if x squared is equal to 0, then x is equal to the square root of 0, which is just 0. Okay, because remember, there's only one solution, because we don't have plus or minus zeros. All right, and last but not least. So we've got x squared minus x squared minus 3x plus 6 is equal to minus 6 minus 3x. And we've got this thing on the right here again. So when is x greater than 0? So again, we're going to start off by just ignoring that. Okay, cross it out. Well, don't you cross it out because, you actually need it. And I can rub mine out by, tapping a button. But we're going to ignore that for now. Now we're going to move everything to the same side. Now I've got minus 3x and minus 3x. So again, if I've got the same thing on both sides, they're just going to cancel out like that. Nice and easy. Now, this is not going to happen with the 6's this time because I've got a plus 6 and I've got a minus 6. Excuse me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the minus 6 to the other side. So I'm going to move this one, the plus 6 to the other side, because I'm going to try and get this x squared by itself. Okay, so if I minus 6 and minus 6, that leaves me with this guy here, which is minus x squared. And that's equal to minus 6, which is minus 12. So if negative x squared is equal to negative 12, then that must mean that x squared is equal to positive 12, okay? Which means I can get an answer for this. So if x squared is equal to 12, then x must be equal to plus or minus the square root of 12. And because the square root of 12 doesn't give us a nice number, that is as much as we need to do. That is the exact value. That is us done. Okay, so this has been the last bit. Almost forgot. Now we need to think about this x is greater than 0. So what does this mean? Well, we're only looking for the answer where x is bigger than 0. So in other words, do we want the positive or do we want the negative? Well, we just want the positive. Therefore, x is equal to the square root of 12, the positive square root of 12, and that's our final answer there. Because again, we only want the one that is bigger than 0. Now, with that being said, this is our last topic for this chapter, and this will be the last lesson that you guys will be required to do this term. So if you have more math lessons coming up, awesome. You can chill then for the rest of the term or catch up on the other stuff that you need to. Okay, the reason we're not going to keep going because A, we've only got like 1 or 2 lessons at the most, maybe, if we were to keep going. And we are starting a new topic after this one, so we don't necessarily need, like if we started, doing the first thing next week or this week, whenever you're watching this video, and then we have our 2-week holiday, and then there's no point of just doing one lesson. So with that being said, I hope you've enjoyed these little videos. I hope you enjoy your holiday, even though if we can't go outside very much. And with that being said, I hope to see you guys next term, but that's still up in the air as of right now. But until the next one, it might be a video or it might be a in person, but regardless, I'll talk to you soon.